Hi, everyone. Welcome to Nancy's Metaphysical World and More. My name is Nancy, and I host a show. Today, it's going to be a pretty good show. It's going to be a little controversy. Might not be liked by many people, might help wake up some other people, but my guest's name is Stephen Sidoni, and he's an author, a filmmaker, and he has hosted his own show. Plus, he also spends many hours searching through all the histories of unsolved mysteries. So, Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you for having me today.
Now, Stephen, let's talk a little bit about you first. Let's talk about who Stephen is. What got you prompted into doing all this research, and how many times you've been in trouble with the government?
Well, I got to tell you, it all started back in 1998. I was visiting Montreal, Canada, on a vacation, and I was in a club called the Wax Lounge in Montreal, and as I left the club about 1 o'clock in the morning, I was stopped by a car that almost sideswiped me, forced me to the curb, and two guys got in my face, and one wanted to talk to me in Arabic, and I looked over and I said, "I'm American," and then all of a sudden he spoke the King's English. The other fellow pulled out a submachine gun, pointed at my face, and they wanted to search my car. So at this point, I wanted to see identification. It was raining like a bandit. I get out of my car, and he reluctantly shows me his ID before I would give him mine, and it was a symbol of the Jewish menorah for the Jewish Mossad of Israel. So my first question to him, after giving him my ID at that point, what is the Israeli Mossad doing operating in Canada at 2 o'clock in the morning, stopping an American, and calling me Mohammed? So the other guy still had the gun on me, and he says, "Well, we're looking for terrorists." I says, "Well, I think you should be looking at yourselves and not me." He goes, "Well, we'd like to search your car." I says, "Only if I can watch." So I did. They didn't find anything in my car, and then they let me go. And I told them before I left, "I'm never going to forget your face, and I will be telling U.S. Customs when I leave the country in the morning." I says, "Because I don't know who you guys are," because I had just passed the police sobriety check, and the police had let me go through, so I knew what the Montreal police looked like. So the following morning, I went to the U.S. Customs, told them, and I find myself a couple months later under surveillance by the U.S. government, looking at me, following me to work back and forth. And then after a couple of years of this, I see the 9/11 thing happen, and they had a report. The FBI was looking for 5 guys who had entered the country illegally from Canada that they were looking for, who were suspects in the 9/11 plot. They thought there was a terrorist cell operating out of Canada. Lo and behold, I saw the 5 photos that they were showing on the 6 o'clock news. I remember Tom Jennings was the reporter at the time showing the news, broadcasting it. And I remember 2 of the faces, of the 5 were the guys who stopped me in '98. So the first thing I did after seeing the broadcast, I called up the FBI office in Pennsylvania. They told me I was mistaken. I said, "No, I'm not." The next morning, I called up the FBI office in New York. They tried to say I was bugging out. I go, "No, I'm not." I says, "I'll be down to your office tomorrow." So next day, I says, rather than go to their office, I went directly to the New York papers. I drove from Pennsylvania to Manhattan, which is about an hour and 10 minutes from where I lived in Pennsylvania. I lived right across the border. So I went all the way in to see the editor of the New York Times. He wouldn't see me, so I left him a note. Then I went to the New York Post, the Daily News. So I went to like 3 different papers to make them aware of what was going on, that I had information that I believed that these guys were part of that terrorist cell that they were looking for. Next thing I know, 2 days later, I hear on the news, "Well, we're not looking for these guys anymore." Well, BS, because I'm looking for these 2 guys who stopped me at 2 o'clock in the morning, because I know what they look like, Nancy, when somebody puts a gun in your face, you do not forget.
I wouldn't think so. So let's go on forward from there, Stephen. Now, because I've talked with you before and I've interviewed you before, and like I told the people when we first started, this is going to be a little controversy, and that's okay, because I don't mind controversy. In fact, I like it. So we're going to talk about Mr. President-elect Obama and the things that's gone down since he's been in office. So you have a theory about who he really is. Do you want to tell the listeners who you think he is?
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to share with you. I'm going to start back to February of 2010. In February 2010, somebody sent me a YouTube video regarding the possibility that Barack Obama posed as Osama bin Laden. So I watched the video. I thought it was a stretch at first, to be honest with you. And then I come to thinking, I kept thinking, I said, what, let me put it up to my my higher self, because usually being an investigator, I go through looking at things. I always put it out there and see if I can get, the information from a higher source. And what I got back within like 4 hours was, Stephen, there's two things you can't fake. It's your fingerprints or palm prints. So I said, okay, let me Google what the odds are of two people having the same palm or fingerprints. The odds, Nancy, was 64 billion to 1. So at that point, I said to myself, well, if the odds are 64 billion to 1, and there's only 7 billion people on the planet, then if his palm prints match the palm prints from the photo, then I have a bullseye. So at that point, I collected all the photos I could of Osama bin Laden and Barack Obama. What I noticed, I got 5 different Osama bin Ladens, and they kept getting younger in age. I go, wait a minute. How am I getting 5 different guys who look like the first Osama bin Laden, but they're all different in age and getting younger and younger? And then finally, when I got to about the 5th one, there was the one with the hand up as though he's pledging for allegiance. And I'm looking, and that was the one the fella had sent me that he believed Obama posed as Osama in a phony Taliban photo shoot. So now I went, I cropped the photo, I cropped the hand, and then I got every photo I could of Obama to match the palm prints. And what I found out was they were very, very close. And so close that I went and put up a video on it. And this was back in February of last year. And when I did that, on February 22nd, I'm followed in New York City by FBI Director himself, Robert Mueller, and his assistant, Joseph Damaris. And I even have their photos to prove it. So I'm standing 3 feet from Director FBI Mueller, and I'm looking at him. I smiled. I took his photo, just like I took Joseph's, his assistant. But what I did was I went and I made up a YouTube video, and I put up the assistant director's photos and plastered it all over the Internet, Craigslisted him, and also I went to every precinct in Brooklyn and gave the precinct in Brooklyn the flyers. Guess who was following me? The assistant director. So now I made a laughing stock out of him. So Mueller, at this point, I call up his office, and I call up the office of the New York assistant director, and for 4 days straight, I'm calling them to call me back. And what my question was, Nancy, why are you both following me? But neither one of them returned my phone call, so I realized, you know what? I'm going to hold this in my memory bank. I've got their photos. I'm not going to put out Mueller's photos. I'm going to save them for a later date, like an insurance policy. If I need them, I'll have them later. The following day, Obama was in New York for he had to address the United Nations. The day he announced the United Nations, above my head there are 2 black helicopters and a helicopter with the presidential seal on it, which I have the photo of as well. So at this point, I'm now being followed. This is like now the end of February, early March. They crashed my computer modem 3 times. They bugged my telephone. It was interesting. What they did was there was an intercom in my apartment house. What they did was they wired from the basement the telephone to the intercom so that way they could hear me coming or going. And then when I called the telephone company to come to resolve the problem, because I kept hearing clickings in the phone, they says, we don't know how it happened, Mr. Sindoni, but somehow your telephone is wired to your intercom. I says, well, I know if you guys didn't do it, somebody else must have done it. So I realized that there was, a big surveillance on me. Right after that, when I realized that, you and I had spoken, and we did an interview. This was last year in April 10th, I believe. And when we did that interview, the morning you and I were on the interview, I said to you during the last interview, I've had 3 helicopter flybys outside of the window. I guess they didn't want me to do this interview today. But I had been badgered, the whole time there in New York there. From April to May, I was followed on a daily basis every day. They were even trying to give me like a bus pass for next to nothing so that way they could, or a train pass to get me to know when I was getting on and off the subway so that way they could follow me in and out of the city. So at that point I said, I got to come back to the West Coast. So this was like on May 1st, I decided to come back and I wanted to do some more research on J.C. Brown. So after that, you and I spoke probably June or July of last year, and I told you that my computer had been hacked in June or July because you and I were talking about doing some work for you. I know you had the nonprofit school there, and I had said to you that I have to hold off for a couple of days because I'm having a computer problem. So at that point last year, I had to resolve my computer problem, and then they were looking for it. I guess they wanted to find the Mueller's photos or whatever I had, so they ransacked the place where I was staying in Oregon there, but they couldn't find what they were looking for. Then in August, I was nearly run over by a car in August, and they got close, but they didn't get me that time. Last September, I decided to leave Oregon and go to Shasta because I wanted to go start looking again for the Hollow Earth, the tunnels of the Legend of J.C. Brown. So I went back down to Shasta now, and as I get to Shasta, again, there's attempts made again on my life, and luckily God loves me because I'm still here, and so from September through probably through March, I lay pretty low, and then in April, they started again with the surveillance helicopters, and I got a little annoyed, so I did an interview on Trend Center Radio with this fellow Vikens Moskova regarding the identity of Barack Obama. And at that point, I said I was going to come back to New York, but I was on my way to Washington because I wanted to collect a $25 million reward for information on the capture of Osama bin Laden. So in April, the third week of April, I call up FBI Director Robert Mueller's office. I leave a message to him, say, Robert, I'm coming to Washington to collect a $25 million reward because I believe that Barack Obama has posed as Osama bin Laden, and I can prove it. So on the 27th of April, I put out a video called the Real Slim Shady Movie, which shows Barack Obama posing as Osama. 3 days later, on May 1st or 2nd, they decided to kill bin Laden off because I had just bought a train ticket to go to Washington, D.C., so that way I could go collect the reward. I was going to make a big stink of it. So some people might find it hard to believe, but I put an end to the bin Laden, and what was funny is because the way they had to kill him off, it doesn't even make sense. I mean, even a bad scriptwriter could have came up with a better scenario than they did.
What's really funny about the killing of Osama, because people send me things all the time, and at least 10 different people sent me some information that actually Osama bin Laden had died back in, I believe it was 2001, of some kidney ailments, an incurable disease of the kidneys. Now, I can't prove that by any means, but I have to agree with you that what they put out on the news absolutely makes no sense. And the way they kept trying to deny different things and not put it out right away also makes no sense. And the part of burying him at sea makes totally no sense. So maybe go ahead and explain that.
Well, what happened was when they did that, I put out another video called The Boogeyman. Like who's next? The Boogeyman. And I do voiceovers and impressions. And I did a voiceover impression of George W. Bush, with bin Laden talking about now that Sindoni's exposed the plan. Who's next? The Boogeyman. And George Bush gives Barack Obama ideas for who's going to be the next Boogeyman, because now that Sindoni forced the issue, so you guys had to kill off the make-believe bin Laden, let me give you some tips, pointers, who might be next. So I made a joke at him, and I call up, again, the FBI director's office. Call me. We need to talk. So I'm badgering him at this point. This is, in June. It's okay. I can't collect the $25 million, but, I'm going to give you a piece of my mind because I still have your photos. And I even, did up a video where I was going to sell them on eBay. I was going to auction off his photos and the assistant director's photos on eBay. I think, okay, you want to play? We'll play. I can't get my $25 million reward, but you know what? I'm going to have fun with you because I don't fear you because I'm going to, by the time we get done with the show, I'm going to lay this all out to show everybody that I'm a thinker. So now after this, I decided I'm going to contact John Boehner, of the House Speaker, which I did in the last 2 weeks. And I contact John. John, we need to talk because we have to start the impeachment process of Barack Obama. He emails me back, a generic email. Thank you for the response. Contact my forum. Says, you know what? I'm going to put out another YouTube movie directly and speak to him.